Good evening, viewers, and welcome to this edition of Energy This Week. I'm Ademola Adedoyin. Tonight, we are treating a topic that is very crucial and critical to the oil industry operators, upstream and downstream. We are focusing on an issue that is a key determinant factor in the operations of the sector. The issue in focus this week is the challenges of funding the oil industry by Nigerian banks.
One day, we had a vision to improve the way people access their fuel products. Now, 1 in 5 cars drives on our fuel. But that was not enough. So we pioneered the provision of cleaner, safer fuel to local industries through the fastest growing gas supply network in sub-Saharan Africa. Still, that was not enough. So we invested in the acquisition of rigs for oil and gas exploration. We strive towards our future when we, a proudly Nigerian company, will offer the complete solution to Nigeria's energy needs. Owando, the future is here.
So critical is the issue of funding that during its last annual conference, the Nigerian Association of Petroleum Explorationists, NAPE, brought in managing directors of 2 major banks, Diamond Bank PLC and First City Monument Bank. But before we go further, let's serve you fresh the news of the week.
Good evening, viewers. Welcome to News of the Week. My name is Perpetua Ibonluwa. First, the headlines. 60 Nigerians off to Norway on PTDF scholarship. Electricity generation dropped by 954 megawatts in 2013. Now the details. The Petroleum Technology Development Fund PTDF held induction program for 60 scholars billed to travel to Norway for studies. The scholars were provided scholarship by the PTDF to study in Norway. 12 females and 48 males were successfully selected to study BSc programs in oil-related fields in Oxford University College, Fredrikstad, Norway. Addressing the scholars at the departure event, Executive Secretary of the PTDF, Dr. Oluwole Oluleye, said the educational program was part of the agency's capacity development mandate for the oil and gas industry and youth development. Represented by Malam Balarabe Ahmed, General Manager, Administration and Human Resources, Oluleye said the award for the scholars was unique because it is the only program the fund was undertaking in partnership with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, UNITA. Said merit and federal character principles were used in selecting the scholars, with preference given to the Niger Delta. Oluleye said the fund decided to initiate the program based on the huge successes recorded and the training of scholars at MSc and PhD levels over the years, adding that the program would be beneficial to Nigeria if youths are given the opportunity to explore various undergraduate programs under the amnesty program of the federal government. Electricity generation dropped by about 954 megawatts last year, records for the Power Ministry have shown. The records show that on December 30, 2013, Nigeria generated 3,563 megawatts as compared to 4,517 megawatts on December 2012. This represented a drop in generation of 954 megawatts. NEMA said the deterioration of supply in Lagos area arose from compounded gas shortage following the recent extensive vandalism of the Extravagant Lagos Western Axis gas pipeline. That's all for News of the Week. Thanks for watching. I'm Perpetua Ibonluwa. Join us again next week.
Welcome back. In the studio tonight is an authoritative voice on funding, a leading banker and director corporate banking, Diamond Bank PLC, whose portfolio includes oil and gas business. We welcome to the studio Mr. Samuel Egube. Mr. Egube, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So let us start off immediately. Let us look at Nigerian banks. We want to look at their capacity. We want to look at the upstream sector particularly, whose businesses are denominated in dollars, and we're talking of millions of dollars. Will you say Nigerian banks have the capacity to fund operations in that sector?
Well, to come straight to it, I will say yes, but you need to understand the way banks work. There are 2 elements that contribute to capacity to funding dollar-based transactions. One of them is your capital adequacy, and you realize that banks, through series of reforms, have had to increase their capital requirements to be able to ensure that they have a more robust capacity to do this. The second also is dollar liquidity, okay, which means you have sufficient dollars, as in the dollar cash, dollar liquidity to put into that transaction, and that to the extent that Nigeria is not a dollar country, you of course will expect that there should be some limitation. But you also must consider the fact that the banking institution is an intermediation industry, and therefore it is not limited to its capacity on its own. And Nigerian banks, like banks all over the world, okay, have relationships and linkages that help them collaborate and work together. And what that means, therefore, is that the capacity that is available to the Nigerian banking industry is not limited to the capacity that is available to Nigeria as a country in terms of the banking industry. Now, I said yes because given that background, it means therefore that if something is requiring funding in Nigeria, then Nigerian bank can assess both its capacity and the global banking capacity to do what needs to be done. The difference being that the risk assessment as viewed from different countries to Nigeria will vary as you go from country to country, and the appetite to do transactions with Nigeria from out there will change based on the way they perceive the risk in Nigeria. Now, the banking industry in Nigeria has shown a lot of resilience over time. I mean, don't forget that when the telecoms industry was being privatized, the same was also said that Nigerian banks could not do that in sector. But today, Nigerian banks delivered that industry. They have commitments to that industry in excess of $5 billion. Yeah. That's Nigerian banks. Yeah. Nigerian banks also, they were not seen as being positioned to do a lot in the upstream. And when Shell did its divestment, Nigerian banks again delivered it. Just like we've delivered also the power sector largely. And we continue to do that. I mean, the industry just closed another deal with the Dangote Group, 3-point-something billion. That is the Nigerian banking industry speaking.
Except that the oil industry, unlike the telecom, power sector and all of that, the oil industry has been there for over 5 decades. And the participation of Nigerian banks appears to have been minimal. Of course, it's growing in recent times. But at a recent NAPEC conference, your managing director, Dr. Alex Oti, cited long gestation periods, insecure locations, and poor infrastructure, among other factors that make funding the marginal fields unattractive to banks. Given the highlighted factors, where does that leave the indigenous companies who are playing this on the marginal field sector?
Well, it's a fact. Those issues actually plague not only the Nigerian oil and gas industry, but Nigeria as a country. Okay, but because we're institutions working in Nigeria, one of the roles we play is to come out with solutions. Okay, I mean, if businesses must grow in this country, then the banking industry must find a way, working with the players in that industry to navigate some of these challenges. For example, when you talk about the risk in terms of safety and security issues in this sector, typically a lot of it comes out of community restiveness. And one of the things we then do, having pointed that as a risk, is to then direct players to ensure that they have a working understanding with the community. It does not completely eliminate it, but it reduces it significantly. It's also important, when you talk about infrastructure. Being a marginal field player, you have limitations in the kind of investment you need, because the fact that you have oil in the ground doesn't turn it to cash. You need to work on surface infrastructure, your pipelines and your production facilities to get it into market.
Yeah.
Okay, and what that therefore means is that in then appraising how to design a structure to funding some of these players, you then have to look at it full cycle, you know, to ensure that you address all of those issues that do play out. So they are not abandoned, and they know that the banking industry is actively participating with them to bring out solutions, whether they are downhole solutions or surface solutions, to deliver their requirements.
Will you say Diamond Bank has actually demonstrated competency and good capacity for funding operations in that sector? You want to cite something?
Yeah, I mean, we've participated very actively. We participated in all the rounds. I mean, whether it's in the Shell divestment, we were there. We are funding marginal field operators. And one way to just know is really third-party confirmation. Just recently, Petan awarded Diamond Bank as the best financial sector organization to that industry.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now, Petan is an interesting association. It's an association of business owners. So if the business owners say so, then they must be correct. It means Diamond Bank is doing well. Also, Global Finance did give us an award as the best investment oil and gas bank in Africa. You know, so Diamond Bank has done quite a lot in the sector. We are leaders also in the service side when it comes to supporting marine business in that sector. And that has also been acknowledged by NIMASA. We're one of the banks that partner with NIMASA in terms of funding that sector.
Okay, Mr. Egube,
in addition to that, we also are working very closely with the Nigerian Content Board, to support local content. And that we are really, really active on an advisory basis, on a participatory basis.
That's interesting. We want to cite, for the benefit of viewers at home, we want to cite one or two specific things that really tried your bank and you were able to see the transaction through.
Typically, these are customer-related transactions, and customer informations are quite confidential, which we cannot.
But some of them are in the public domain. Like if you participated in the Dangote thing, for instance, it's in the public domain. So some of these transactions are actually there for the public to know.
Yes, they are there for the public to know, and to the extent that the public needs to know, they have to be channeled through formal channels based on the channels approved by those transaction forms. But what I have just said is that in terms of challenges which banks face, and which we face, because if you say you are a leader, then you definitely face significant amount of more of those challenges because you interact more often with the players. I had said it earlier, it has to do with the businesses themselves. Now, if I cannot predict how your business will behave because the way you are structured internally is suspect, then it's difficult, even when you have great contracts, to do that. Also, sometimes the entire period that it takes to come out with the contracting process also is a major challenge in the sector. I mean, if an indigenous business which is small is growing and it takes him 3 years to come through a process of one contract, he's dead on arrival. He's not even alive to do the transaction when he finally wins. You know, so those are real challenges that plague the industry.
Thanks so much. Now let's take a look at the downstream sector. I remember a time was that many banks got their fingers burnt funding depots, tank farms, and all of that, and it led to a very serious crisis in the industry. Now, what lessons have the bank learned from that episode?
Quite a lot, but it's just like in life, you know, what happened when fundamentals of credit risks are overlooked, you always have a bust at some point. The downstream business is a thin margin business, and if it is thin, it means it cannot resist a lot of shocks. Therefore, it's in addition, it's a highly leveraged sector. What that means is that it is very risky. Now, so one of the things you do go out of that period with is to say, look, when there is a boom, and the boom is sustained for a while, people throw their sense of risk out of the window because you've done 1, 2, and then little by little you remove all your risk mitigants, and then you forget about the risk mitigants. And so when the shocks do come, it comes and it faces you without those mitigants in place. And I think that is it. So typically what banks do now is to just keep the caution alive, and through review processes they are able to say, look, are the mitigating circumstances which we need to control this side of the business still sustained? Now some banks do it better than others, as you will agree with other businesses.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Now specifically funding importation of products, especially PMS. Fine, some sanity appears to have returned to that business, but we still have a situation where the Ministry of Finance is not living up to the 45-day cycle. So many oil marketers, oil importers are complaining that their money, their funds are not being paid as at when due, and they are in trouble with their banks and all of that. How has this affected the way you fund importation of products?
Of course, if you are in trouble with your banks, then the bank will show significant amount of restraint in funding you. I think the way the PPPRA template was designed was supposed to take care of this, in sense that they are supposed to also look at interests that accrue as a result of such delays, and if there are foreign exchange fluctuations, they are supposed to look at it. But the experience is that it sometimes that area becomes arguable as to what amount of foreign exchange exposure should PPPRA pay for, and what amount of interest should they be accounting for, because of course sometimes your interest burden might be a function of how you negotiated with the banks, maybe a function of how you organized your business, okay, and all that. So typically the marketers don't come out all the time where they really would like to come out, and when they are short like that, it creates a gap in the bank, and the bank therefore would do less and less of such transactions with such counterparties. So it's a slowdown, really. It just makes the industry riskier, and it's hoped that we are able to come around to ensure that the entire process is more predictable. That way banks can support it better.
So you want to call on government, Ministry of Finance and all of that, to the way they can ensure smoother relationship with the oil importers is to pay us at when due and all of that?
Well, it's a fact of good business practice, that if I commit to you to pay you in 45 days, best business practice is I should organize myself to make that payment happen in 45 days. But the reality is that there are all kinds of challenges that affect that expectation, and so you then begin to watch your receivable aging analysis, and as it gets worse, your risk gets higher. So I think it behoves on the federal government to ensure that the risk environment under which the downstream sector runs is less risky. And I think it's not only government that has a part to play in that. If you look at this point you just raised, yes, they have a lot of part to play in that, and I think they should play that part. But also the practitioners should play a part in running more efficiently their businesses, running their businesses in a way where their profit expectation is not relying solely on extracting benefits from government, you know. And if everybody plays that part, then you have a better sector to manage.
Thanks so much, Mr. Egube. Now, recently, a group of Nigerian banks, including yours, put their funds together and part-funded the 400,000 barrels a day Dangote refinery, which is supposed to come on stream by 2016. Now, that's a very good development. But the big question is, will Nigerian banks give a similar support to some institutions that may not have the type of weight that a Dangote brand has?
Well, you give exposures based on the weight of the institutions. So the banking industry will do the same for any company that has the same weight or the same structure or the same capacity as Dangote. Now, if you have less weight, less structure than Dangote, then the industry will do less also for you. So it's not about Dangote. It's about the way he has run his business and the way he has put his structure together and has grown over the years. You wouldn't give a child a Rolls Royce.
That's just the idea. That is why we're talking of the Dangote brand and not Dangote as a person. The point I'm trying to make is that assuming another company comes up tomorrow, it has got the analysis right, it has got the feasibility study right, and it's going to do, say, 300,000 barrels a day refinery. Okay, I'm just wondering, will the banks also throw their weight behind such a person, but such institution, which may not have the type of weight that the Dangote brand has?
Is the point I'm making. When you talk about the Dangote brand, it's not about just feasibility studies. It's about track record. It's about the capacity of the Dangote group itself. So you have an excellent feasibility study. Have you demonstrated capacity to execute over time? Dangote has done several. So you cannot remove the performance track record, the capacity of the group from the kind of support they get or the kind of partnership they are able to attract from the banking industry. So it will go beyond the feasibility study, the business plan. It will go into the way your business is structured, your history over time. I mean, you don't put 3.3 billion on just on feasibility study. You also want to look at the partners, the technical people coming into that business, the technical people involved with the development, with the construction, even with operating and managing the entire thing. So all of that must come to place to determine and to size the kind of commitments that banks will make to any transaction. So because transactions differ from transaction to transaction, the kind of support they can attract also will differ.
Thanks so much. Now, so from your experience in this industry, how will you describe the type of support that the oil industry has received from the banking industry in the last, say, 5 years? How will you describe it?
I would say it's been fantastic. And I would say so because I know so. Okay. There's nothing you see in this industry today that is not connected to banking support. Okay, the banks have been in the forefront of encouraging Nigerian content development. Okay, and we, Diamond Bank, for example, has been quite active, just doing that, both in terms of working the framework on the constitutional side, the way it is implemented, and then supporting it also with cash. We also partner, like with some other banks, with the IOCs to also push and support this sector quite aggressively. So I would say that the support has been nice. What I will also say is that as more and more indigenous participants begin to play in the industry, you see more knowledge go around, and therefore technical skills within the banks and also within the companies themselves tend to improve as cooperation among banks and among players begin to increase. The third thing also is that historically, Nigerian banks hardly saw the dollars from this oil industry. When the IOC sell their oil, it goes out there to some international bank, and when NNPC sells his share of oil, it goes to the central bank. So how is the banking industry supposed to then get the dollar liquidity to fund the industry when the dollar flows hardly came there? Now, but what you see now with a lot of shell divestment and all of these marginal fields being more and more active is that the banking industry increasingly is beginning to see some of those dollar flows. And so the capacity to do more dollar transactions begin to happen. Also, with the Nigerian Content Act, you then see a lot of indigenous companies begin to do more and bigger contracts in dollar terms. And as those dollars flow in, it also supports the liquidity of the banking industry in Nigeria.
That's a piece of cheering news. Now, lastly, Mr. Egube, what do you have to say? What piece of advice do you have to offer the industry operators, that's the oil industry operators, to enhance, to grow the relationship between the financial institutions and their industry?
Okay, that banks are businesses and are not social institutions, and therefore for them to survive they must do business, And that sector is a critical sector in Nigeria today. And therefore, that industry should be rest assured that banks will continue to support it. But the second thing I would like to say is that because it's strategic, the players in that industry must understand that they must put their house together on a better platform. They need to put better governance systems in place. They need to invest in their own businesses and not just make profit and spend in other things. They need to invest in their own businesses. They need to protect the industry also by performance, because you always have all kinds of bad eggs coming into the industry and creating a trail of losses. So they need to do that as well. I would also ask that the bigger companies should protect systems that allow banks fund, systems that border on assurances that there will be domiciliation arrangements when things are done and funded, systems that ensure that the contracting process doesn't take a long while for it to come through, so that the gestation periods are quicker. And if all of these come together, I do not think that, I just think things will get better with the industry, and everybody does have a role to play in all of this.
Thanks so much, Mr. Egube, for coming on the program.
My pleasure.
Be rest assured that we will not hesitate to call you in future when the need arises. We thank you so much for coming on the program.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One day, we had a vision to improve the way people access their fuel products. Now, 1 in 5 cars drives on our fuel. But that was not enough. So we pioneered the provision of cleaner, safer fuel to local industries through the fastest growing gas supply network in sub-Saharan Africa. Still, that was not enough. So we invested in the acquisition of rigs for oil and gas exploration. Strive towards our future when we, a proudly Nigerian company, will offer the complete solution to Nigeria's energy needs. Owando, the future is here.
Well, viewers, you have heard it from the paymaster's mouth, as it were. I'm sure oil industry operatives must have learned 1 or 2 tricks on how to get the funds out for their operations. For your views on this, feel free to reach us on info@energythisweek.tv. This interview can also be accessed on our website, energythisweek.tv. Till I come your way next week, I remain yours sincerely, Ademola Adedoyin. Bye for now.